When it was first decided we would take this third planet from its star, this little blue and green marble didn't seem like much. Neither did its inhabitants. Its inhabitants numbered over 8 billion, yet they seemed more interested with killing each other than they seemed with reaching out to the stars. There were a few that did, of course, but not nearly enough to reach out and propagate their species out to the stars as any sentient and sapient species would do. We conversed on this in our councils for many, many years. The humans would call these almost decades, yet we still conversed on it more and more. We saw that they were continuing to grow, and yet they seemed to be fierce. They didn't show any signs that they would begin to calm down and become one with the galactic. We were going to follow the rules and let them extend past their own sector to reach out at least 2 sectors in any direction, and that they would butt up right against our territory. It was debated for a long, long time whether we should allow them to do this, being that we are the most powerful of all the empires out here, at least known throughout galactic history. We decided that it would be more prudent to simply snip the top off this flower so that we could take the rest for ourselves. So the battle plan was decided. We would go into the planet where a few other species were trying to subjugate them through more nefarious means. Yet we had no interest in them. They weren't a very strong race. They tried to stay quiet and hide themselves. Yet every time we found them in their holes, they definitely gave up quickly. So we did not expect them to do much for the humans. Our battle plan was simple. We would simply drop containers onto the surface to release a plague, one strong enough that it would end at least 50% of the humans, knocking the rest of them out of commission, unable to defend themselves, unable to hold against our forces. And when we showed up, we would tell them that we had been tracking an interstellar plague, and we had the cure. Of course, the cure was nothing more than a placebo. It was simply, as the humans would say, smoke and mirrors, and what they call an animal show, dog and pony. Although it seems to be a bit much for simply saying subterfuge. In true reality, most of the bug itself, the virus that was released, would simply burn out before we even got there. Yet the fear, we could rule by the fear, at least for a while, and they would welcome us with open arms. And before they knew it, they would be subjugated and basically in chains before they knew anything. It was many, many millennia since we'd actually had to put anyone in chains. Yet, we looked at how small, yet how strong these creatures were. Although small is a moot point, as they were only about 5% below ours. Yet it was still enough for a noticeable difference. Also the fact that they grew, what did they call that again? Yes, hair. We did not understand this. Our plumage of our males was all that was needed for us. Maybe it was a different type of plumage. We didn't know, nor did we care. And at first, everything went well. The containers went into their atmosphere and were immediately looked at by many of their in-atmosphere aircraft as they plummeted down and then simply burst. It was believed by their transmissions that they would simply think that these were craft coming down that burned apart in the atmosphere, when in actuality they exploded specifically to release the virus out amongst their planet and to spread it as far as possible. Through their transmissions, we could see that many of their population was fearing it. This disease was extremely virulent. Anyone it touched would instantly become ill, many of them becoming violently ill, to the point where their own blood would seep out through several of the orifices on the head even orifices in other areas. It was rather gruesome to watch, and many of us turned away as we watched many of them jump and flinch on the ground, something the humans call a seizure. And then they would simply stop and cease, as in cease all functions. We realized that the virus worked well. We did not expect it to work this well, as apparently as they had shot themselves full of different chemicals to stop other viruses, they had somehow weakened their immune systems to the point where now the virus that we sent would hit them far too hard, and many humans died from what they call shock. We understood this concept. We simply call it grahal. And yet, it still made everything work even better. Many of them stopped fighting each other as they decided to take care of the injured, the wounded, and the dead. And we saw their economies go to almost complete collapse. We saw their governments straining to survive, and we knew this would be the best time. So we contacted them. And we ended up going down to their planet, introducing ourselves as their savior, showing up in full encounter suits just in case they had a virus of their own we didn't want to catch. And we simply stated that we were releasing an antibody, an antigen, a way of stopping the virus itself. In actuality, the virus itself had already burned itself through the atmosphere and was already done. But they didn't know that, nor did they need to know that. We simply offered them a way to save themselves, to come with us, to be one with the galactic at whole, and definitely with our hegemony. They agreed, many did. In several parts of the planet, they walked up and began to get on their knees and bow to us as though we were gods. It was entertaining. Yet our leaders made sure that we did not take this too far, as a few decided to take some liberties with a few of the humans. The humans did not enjoy this at all, and many of them did not quite survive what came. However, the humans that did survive began to tell the story of what had happened, and there seemed to be just the slightest bit of rebellion. We did not understand this. But as the word got around that we were not such benevolent creatures, more and more humans turned away. Though we had the vast majority of the population, we did not worry about it too much. We had simply a small contingent, only 480,000 of our own on the planet. All the ships were inside the planet, usually parked, simply stopped right there on the surface as we worked our own deals, made sure we could get as much as possible from the humans before they realized what we were doing. But more and more humans seemed to go away, and eventually, some decided to fight back against us. This is common, so we did not take it too personal at first. Yet we saw more and more, and eventually we had to send out our own teams. We told their governments we need to take their weapons away so that they did not hurt their benefactors, as in us. But this would be very, very difficult for many portions of the planet, as projectile weapons were extremely common, and in some areas they were very, very proficient with them. Though crude, projectile weapons were effective. Usually this meant that we had to stay in our encounter suits because the automated systems that would heal our wounds would definitely keep us alive. So we'd spend more and more time in them as we traversed from one area of the planet to another, working with the leaders to try and secure the planet completely. And that is when more and more of them began to go away. The humans would not show up for meetings. And when asked where the others were, the humans, I didn't know if they feigned ignorance or not, but they simply could not figure out where the others were. The only thing we ever got was one of the humans said, "I think you pissed him off." We still don't don't understand that phrase. Why would we urinate away from them? What? Huh? We had to reset our translator on this one, but apparently it simply came up with human slang, is what they call it. Eventually, we had to call for reinforcements as more of these attacks were more and more common, and the planet began to, well, reject us, for lack of a better term. Our subjugation fleet began to land. Another 7 or 8 ships, I remember, at least 8 of them. This more than doubled our amount on the planet. And eventually we would go into the different areas to tell them they had to relieve themselves of their weapons and fall under our rule, or else they would fall under our weapons. This was the first time we heard the sound. We didn't know what it was. We just thought it was just machinery. And we would find out very soon that when we heard this sound, if we did not open up our wings and fly away as fast as possible, we were not going to fly anywhere, walk anywhere, or be anywhere, as death would soon follow. We worried about this sound. We asked the humans as we played it back, and they chuckled at it. "How do you not know what that is all we would get from them. It was odd. We couldn't figure out what it was. But we do know that every time we heard this sound, more and more of our people went down. We heard another sound from the humans, a verbal phrase, that we would also begin to fear. We feared this phrase almost as much because it would be usually followed by the other one. And when that happened, many of our brethren would fall. Many of our ships and our technology would be taken away, and we didn't know where. We worried that the humans would begin to reverse engineer everything. We did not want that to happen ever. Because if the humans figured out how to reverse engineer, they would be able to cipher our equipment. And if that was the case, they would learn of our battle plans. They would know everything. They would find out that we were at war and we needed bodies. And these humans, as they like to call themselves, make the perfect cannon fodder. Though slightly smaller than us, they are very strong. Most likely because their gravity is 0.6 times as much as ours. Due to this, they can carry more weapons into battle, actually carry the heavy shields in to protect themselves as they get close. And as we've seen, humans can be very, very aggressive. And when they are being very aggressive, they will also tear things apart. And not just things, but personnel. And we would learn this lesson very, very well. As many and many of our forces began to fall, the humans we thought as our allies would stay back. They would simply state how it was not their issue. They would not take away the weapons. In one particular continent, they said it was actually part of their own law that they would never take the weapons away. We told them that they had to if they wished to fall under our rule. And that was a bad thing to say, because the moment we told them that they would fall under our rule, you could see the look in their eyes. Though they could not tilt their lobes back like the Catal can, which definitely signifies their anger. You could see the vitriol in their eyes as they all stared at us silently. Most of them not blinking, as though they were sizing us up as a predator would a prey before pouncing on it. We worried that this would be the end of us right there in their own large council chambers. But it wasn't. They simply stated that the rebellion was now our problem alone, and they would not interfere on either side. Whatever comes of it, comes of it. This we looked at as our way of taking over large sections of their planet. We realized that if their governments were not going to intercede, we could take large sections. We simply had to get rid of the terrestrial personnel, the locals. Were something we had to get rid of, and we did. But every time we heard the phrase, and then we heard the sound, We knew that something would happen, and many of our teams went down gruesomely. Whenever we heard a Terran say, "Fuck it," we knew we were in trouble. Because humans would suddenly act beyond any form of reason with a viciousness that has not been seen around the galaxy in millennia, as they would come at us with knives and sticks and bare hands, but heaven forbid they have what they call a gun. Because they would simply empty the projectiles into you and laugh as they do it, screaming something along the lines of "Xeno scum." We don't know what scum is, but it sounds very derogatory. We understand the slang term of Xeno now. And before we left the planet, we sent all the messages. We realized that we had completely been overrun, and more than half of our ships had been taken. And we didn't understand how they could send a signal so well, but it was that same sound. I was standing right next to one of our ships when we were looking in through the window of one of these buildings. I listened to the communications before I heard the sound. I heard one of our men hit the door and demand it be open. And before the end of him, I heard the gruesome sound